Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going deep on something absolutely essential for, well, anyone who's ever even thought about the startup world, really the life cycle of a startup.
The ups and downs, the twists and turns.
Exactly. And to guide us on this deep dive, we're taking inspiration from a recent interview with a true legend in finance. We're talking about the one and only Aswath Damodaran.
Ah, Damodaran. Always thought-provoking, that one.
Seriously, he's a renowned NYU finance professor. I mean, the guy literally wrote the book on valuation. But what really caught my eye in this interview was his take on how startups age. He uses this fascinating example of Zomato, the Indian food delivery giant.
Oh, yeah. Zomato's growth has been incredible. From this small startup to a global player, really.
Right, and Damodaran uses them to highlight this idea that even though startups are supposed to be these forces of disruption, they're not immune to, well, aging.
It's true. Even disruptors change over time.
Okay, so let's break down this whole aging thing because it's not like startups are literally getting wrinkles and gray hair, right?
Oh, not literally, no.
Right. So Damon Aaron, in his book, The Corporate Life Cycle, says companies are kind of like us. They go through these different life stages. You've got your young, energetic startups brimming with new ideas. Then they mature, get more established, and eventually some become those big, slow moving corporations that struggle to keep up with the next generation of disruptors.
And what's interesting is that even though those big companies might struggle to innovate at the same pace as startups, Damodaran points out that startups age too, and they can age even faster.
So it's like live fast, die young, but for businesses.
Yeah, in a way, think of it like this. A startup's early years are like dog years. 1 year can feel like five in terms of growth and change, but this super fast evolution can have its downsides. You risk burning out your team, alienating early adopters with constant changes, or even missing those crucial infrastructure needs because you're moving so quickly.
Makes you think about sustainability, right? Like, how do you sprint a marathon?
Exactly, it's a balancing act for sure.
So is that what we saw with Zomato? Did they age really quickly because of their massive growth?
Well, it's not as simple as saying they aged in a bad way, but that rapid growth definitely came with its own set of challenges. I mean, a few years ago, they were the food delivery app in India, experiencing that hockey stick growth. Now, they're this huge company, but keeping up that growth gets tougher every year, especially with more competition popping up.
So how do you fight this whole startup aging thing? Is there a fountain of youth for businesses?
It's less about staying young forever and more about extending that period of peak performance. That sweet spot where you're innovating, growing, and firing on all cylinders. Damodaran talks about extending a company's middle age, and he uses Apple and Microsoft as examples. They've both managed to stay relevant for decades by constantly reinventing themselves.
Totally. Think about it. Apple revolutionized everything with the iPhone, and now they're diving into new areas like augmented reality. And Microsoft, they were once synonymous with PCs, and now they're a powerhouse in cloud computing and AI. They just refuse to get stuck.
They're the ultimate shapeshifters, always adapting.
But how do they do it? What's the secret sauce?
One key ingredient is diversification. Instead of betting everything on one thing, they're constantly branching out into new markets and technologies. Think of it like building a house. You wouldn't want to put all your weight on just one pillar, would you?
Right, you want a strong foundation, multiple supports. So that's diversification, huh? Spreading out your risk, but also tapping into these new opportunities, staying one step ahead.
Exactly. And, it's not always crystal clear where your startup is in its life cycle. It's not like there's a magic formula for this, right?
Tell me about it. You've got your gut feeling, but some hard data would be nice too, right?
Exactly. Damodaran points to a few key things to look at: your current growth phase, your profit margins, and how you see the competition shaping up over the next, say, 5 years. He really highlights that 5 year mark as make or break for startups,
That's years, huh?
Yeah,
It's like a proving ground if you can survive those early years.
it's a good sign. Shows you've built something solid. The article also mentions profit margins as a potential indicator. Like, if your startup's pulling in a 25% profit margin, you're probably in that comfortable middle stage. You've got a business model that works, things are sustainable. But if it's closer to 10% or even lower, well,
You're still figuring things out, still in the early stages.
right. Higher profits usually mean you've found a way to make it work long term. You're not just burning through cash to stay afloat.
Right. It's about finding that sustainable engine for growth.
Exactly. But again, it's all about the bigger picture. What's your growth looking like? How crowded is your market getting? All these things play a role.
Okay, so let's say you've figured out your startup's in a good place, maybe even hitting that mature stage. What's next? What are the typical exit strategies?
Well, mergers and acquisitions are always on the table. Another company sees what you've built, sees the value, and decides to bring you into the fold.
They want a piece of the pie.
Exactly. And then there's the IPO route, of course, taking your company public, offering shares on the stock market.
A whole other ball game, right?
Yeah, for sure. Going public can bring in a ton of cash to fuel growth, but it also means more scrutiny, more pressure to perform for those shareholders. It's like stepping onto a much bigger stage with everyone watching your every move.
High risk, high reward.
Exactly. And this is where Damodaran's insights on valuation become really crucial. He argues that at the end of the day, no one knows your startup better than you. Not even these seasoned investors. Remember his Zomato valuation?
Didn't he value them way lower than what they ended up going for?
Yeah, he did. And he's admitted he got it wrong. He couldn't have predicted their exact path, all the factors that would affect their market value.
So even the experts get it wrong sometimes.
It happens. It just goes to show valuation is subjective. There's
Mhm.
no crystal ball, no matter how much experience you have.
So when it comes to making those big calls, going for an acquisition, taking that IPO leap, it really boils down to trusting your gut.
In a way, yeah. Get all the advice you can, weigh your options, but at the end of the day, you're the one who truly understands your startup's potential. You live and breathe it every single day.
It's true. I was thinking about this the other day because I recently invested in this really promising fintech startup, right?
Hmm.
And hearing Damodaran talk about valuation, it made me realize that even the experts don't have all the answers.
No crystal ball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It all comes back to doing your homework, understanding your own risk tolerance,
Absolutely. It's this constant back and forth, weighing those external opinions against your own internal compass.
finding that sweet spot between trusting your gut and listening to the market. This has been an awesome conversation. So let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today about the startup life cycle, all thanks to Damodaran's work. We talked about how even though startups are supposed to be these disruptors, they're not immune to aging. And that rapid growth, as exciting as it is, can sometimes hide problems beneath the surface.
Right. And we also dug into the importance of diversification to combat that aging process, like Ola getting into electric vehicles. Remember that. It's all about building a stronger, more resilient business.
Absolutely. And we tackled that tricky question. How can entrepreneurs figure out where their startup is in its life cycle? There's no magic formula, but looking at things like your growth phase, profit margins, and that crucial 5-year mark can give you some really good insights.
Are you still in those early, crazy growth years, or have you settled into a more mature phase?
Right. And finally, we talked about those big exit strategies, mergers, acquisitions, IPOs. Understanding your startup's life cycle, it can really help you make smarter decisions about where you want your company to go.
Knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them.
Now, here's a question to leave you with.
Yeah.
How much weight do you place on those external valuations versus your own instincts when it comes to your startup
Mm.
or even your investments?
It's something to think about.
It really is. Damodaran wrestled with this when he got that Zomato valuation wrong. And it's something every entrepreneur faces at some point. There's no easy answer. It's about finding that balance between trusting your gut and being informed. And that's a wrap on today's deep dive. But hey, keep the conversation going. Check out Damodaran's work. He's got some amazing insights on valuation and the corporate life cycle. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.